Welcome to the behind the scenes / commentary for the low carb keto french fry video. My name is Dennis and welcome to my crazy sort of zany channel. This is the video where I share any sort of tips and tricks that I've learned since I posted the video, as well as tips and tricks that I've learned from you guys who have tried the actual recipe and give you a much larger pool of stuff that can go wrong and stuff that can go really, really well, as sort of, and also sort of somewhat kind of is inspiration for other recipes. The second part of the goal of this video is to show sort of the insight of how I make these videos, and that's because I know everything I know because I've just watched behind the scenes, and it's sort of fascinating to me. And if I can provide that sort of knowledge for somebody else in their journey to sort of making crazy zany videos, awesome. So with that, let's get into it. Now, the intro to this video is very weird. I know. I want to sort of create that intrigue, and that's one of those things is making content on YouTube specifically for an internet audience is you have to have that hook. So if you're coming into this video looking for french fries, how to make low carb keto french fries, and this is the first thing you come into, you're like, what am I watching? What is the point of this? And I really didn't necessarily like the choice of music that I made. I don't mean it in the sense that I didn't like the song that I picked. I didn't like the fact that I made it sort of sad, but I think that created that intrigue that I was looking for, and with that I followed up with this sort of happy music right behind it to kind of get you back in the somewhat okay mood. But it definitely creates that sort of, this is not a happy moment. So what's the dichotomy between that not happy moment and this sort of happy moment? How do we get there? How are we going to find out? If you haven't had the Heavenly Fans fries, they're really, really good for what they are, which is vegan and keto. Outside of that, kind of like I go into the video, I think there's a lot of room for improvement, which is what I go for. But they are good. The next thing about this video is this part with me at the door. For some reason, I almost start every one of my videos with a door scene, filming the door scene. It's just something in my head that says, all right, go ahead and just start with the door. So this is what my neighbors think I'm crazy. If you're walking your dog at night and you see all this, like, what's going on here? It's a bit of a crazy setup. One camera over here, Mr. Towley, one light there, one light there. This is the part where the chef shows up. Let's do it. I had a lot of ideas how to get Mr. Potato Head into the video. This is the shortest, most succinct way of getting it and sort of progressing that story. I had a lot of like him running around and sort of getting away from others and hiding and that sort of stuff. But this is the one that worked the most in the final script. Now, this part here is the first part of the video where I use green screen. I'm not a big fan of green screen because you have to have a lot of depth, a lot of really good lights. Otherwise, you get reflection from the green, which you'll see in a little bit here. But this worked really well. So again, since I film everything by myself, it's really difficult to do things in the foreground and the background. So I basically recorded the knife with the box in the back and then shook the box in the back and just green screened it. This part here was not green screen, and this was something that I struggled with for a while. How do I get the box to show movement, to say there's something in the box, but I can do it by myself? What I ended up doing was having a string attached to the box, and you can see my arm sort of jerk, and that's because I'm pulling the box. Worked really, really well. Just positioned the camera in just the right moment. I had some crazy ideas of having string wrapped around and pulleys and all sorts of stuff, but that's just, it's too complicated, and that's where something like a green screen can work. The other half of this sort of small snippet in the video is how much work actually goes into filming those different cuts. I recently watched Rush Hour, the original, which still holds up, fantastic movie. And the whole first 5 minutes is them just cutting back and forth to people on the docks, people on the boat. And when you stop and think about it, you go, okay, they had to have actors say, okay, you're over there, you're doing this. They had to set up the lights, they had to set up the cameras, film, get some B-roll, cut, move the camera, get those actors set up, get the lights set up, film, cut, move. And this happens just non-stop, just cut. So if you're into cinematography or film and don't realize those things, next time you watch a movie, kind of look at it with a critical eye. Like, man, they have changed the camera non-stop in all these crazy angles. That all requires a camera movement, a camera cut and take, or even a separate camera, which gets really complicated in the post edit.
And he is currently surprised because in front of him
Yes, Mr. Potato Head has no ears, and yes, it is Mr. Potato Head. This part here is actually, I managed to get these green gloves. Let me see if I can find them. I can't. It's just it looks like a glove you'd used for a cow. If you know anything about veterinary medicine, but it worked really well. So this one here I just kind of went across, and this is supposed to be a lot longer. It's supposed to show kind of Mr. Potato Head. Why is it showing the bottom? Mr. Potato Head and why he's kind of running away, and me assuring him like, hey, it's just me. I don't eat potatoes anymore. This is just being friendly and no need to be queer or run away from me. The one thing with Heavenly Fans fries is they soak up grease or oil like you would not believe. That's the craziest part. The first time you make them is they're these little tiny things and they just puff up. And like I said, they're really good for what they are, but they can be improved upon. See, they almost look like cassava fries and how big they are. If you do make them and you're going to make a lot of them, make sure to add more oil. So this storyline was something that my friend Jason actually helped me with, and is the source of the Jason method. Same guy. I had a lot of ideas, and he helped me formulate this idea of Mr. Potato Head being from Ireland and kind of leaving through the plague, and this is where I ended up. And so this was actually kind of a lot of fun to find these old paintings and put them in there and adjust the shadow so it doesn't look too out of place. So these are all actual old school pieces of art. This thing here is such a short thing, but actually took quite a bit of time. So what I ended up doing was positioning the potatoes in my room in the corner. Go back to it real quick. And I wanted to mimic the opening of a door. Unfortunately, to do that, I need to have a really, really, really strong light and a door, which I don't have a door in that area. So what I did was I had two pieces of artboard and a flashlight. But if you put the flashlight too close, the cone of light is too spread out. So you pull it back. And what it does is it creates this very distinct line. And what I did is I recorded in 4K so I can zoom in. And I just slowly moved the artboard, which sort of mimicked the door opening. And now you can even see the camera a little bit here. And that was sort of supposed to kind of, it's so minor, but it was supposed to be like, hey, here's this evil, crazy thing coming for it. But that's how I did that. And it was a very novel way of doing it. Nothing complex, which kind of goes into we don't have to do really complex things. We just have to think of how we can do things with what we have. The AirTag thing was also something that Jason helped me with, and it's not GPS. If you have any idea of how the technology works, it's actually really cool. But how I moved Mr. Potato Head there was I went back to back. It was actually really interesting idea that I came up with is I put a piece of paper underneath him, a white piece of paper, and then I just rotate the paper out of camera, which is why you can't see his feet. And the one thing that does is it actually, since it's white, it reflects light and kind of lights him up from the bottom, which you can see on the bottom part here well, you can't really see that, but right above his pants, you can see it's very white, lights him up, works really, really well. And you can move really easily. This shot here was something that happened as I was filming, and I thought it was actually really cool. I kind of buffed it up and seen. Ideally, I would zoom in a lot closer, but I don't have that capability with my lens. But I thought it was really cool just seeing like the reflection of quote unquote the actor and like, oh gosh, what's happening? Again, this scene here took a while to film because trying to get the camera to focus in the right direction and whatnot was actually difficult. The second half is thank you to all my patrons, because one of the things you guys help support is the sort of props and materials that I need for these videos. I didn't have a Mr. Potato Head. I didn't have a chef's jacket. So these are all things that I had to acquire for this video, including the mustache. Now, if you're familiar with the Michelin star system, it's 3 stars. 1 star says it's worth it if you're in the area. 2 says it's worth it driving if you're in the area. And 3 stars is it's worth a trip just to go to that restaurant. I think that's how it is. 3 is you should make a trip out of it. And it's actually an old school thing from the Michelin company, the ones who make the tires, and I think it was a way for them to say you should go to these restaurants because they use more tires, and as a result, we'll sell more tires because you get more wear and tear. Now, kind of going back to the green screen, when I do these sort of split screens, it's not twins. I don't have twins. It's just me. I don't do green screens for the same reasons as before, is you need a lot of space, lights, all that sort of stuff. What I end up doing is I storyboard it out and I position the camera and myself in such a way that the two are not overlapping. So what this is here is it's a spliced video down the middle with me on one side and me on the other side. The difficult part of this is I cannot move anything in the foreground or in the background that I don't intend to until afterwards. So I have to literally film this. I filmed this part from my side first as the chef, not the chef, me as me. And then once I was happy with that recording, which I don't preview, it's just in my head, and hopefully everything goes well, then I can film the other part with Chef Gusteau. The key difference is having that person interact with the environment, like this part here where I'm going to go ahead and touch the box and move the box. That means that film is donezo. Like I can't use any other take, or I have to film everything over again because of the way that it is positioned. The purpose of this here with lifting a box and finding the air tag was supposed to be, until this point we think the attention of Mr. Potato Head is under the box, but he's not. Where did he go? Well, we don't know. And that's where sort of this piece is supposed to fit in, is he's kind of looking at from the cupboard, and that sort of green reflection is actually from the green screen. I actually had the green screen positioned way out and I lit it up, but it's that goes to show how much space you need to have so that it doesn't reflect. It was so strong that it still lit up everything green. It's one of the reasons I don't like using green screen. So this part of the story is originally this script was probably around 30 minutes and I had to cut it down to something a lot shorter. The original intent was he tries these fries and he's like, these are pretty good, but they're really not that great. I need you to do something better. I actually dropped that air tag like 7 times. But the intention of finding something better, he was supposed to have a couple tries, that sort of thing, but in the long term, it didn't make any sense. This part here kind of shows a lot of the things that I tried, and it was supposed to be kind of a misdirection for people thinking this is what he's going to use, which is not true. The pork rinds, I tried, but it was too strong of a flavor. And the potato starch you can replace for the cornstarch that I use later, but it's potato starch, all that sorts of stuff. I'm actually talking to Mr. Potato Head. And this is probably the one piece of storyboard that I think is the best storyboard piece that I've ever actually drawn. And it was this one right here. Now, the one big tip that has come out of this video and the help that you guys do from trying this recipe is the glucomannan cognac konjac. I still don't know how to say it. Whatever, it's fine. Is the quality of the glucomannan powder. Now, there's actually 2 different types of konjac powder, and that's where it goes in the konjac flour, konjac powder, the purity of it. And the key point here is that there's different purities to different brands. I believe the channel is White Cat. She does a lot of stuff with konjac powder. She actually did a really good test of different brands and found that there's really only 2 brands that have close to pure glucomannan or high quality glucomannan powder. One is this Herbal Island that I'm using here, which I ended up striking to the first brand that I tried, and then there's another one I can't remember the name. If you've tried the fry recipe and it's really watery, it's probably your glucomannan powder. To test it, what you do is you take a cup of water, and I think it's a teaspoon of glucomannan powder, mix it, let it sit for 10 minutes. When you come back to it, it should be extremely gelatinous, very viscous. Like you run a spoon through it, it comes back slowly. If it's very watery or it just looks not like gel, your glucomannan powder is not going to be a high quality, and as a result, your fries are going to suck. Where this becomes important is if you're making sort of miracle noodles, konjac noodles, shirataki noodles. That's what you really notice, and that's where I forget her name, has done a lot of research. The video is kind of wonky, but I'll link it down below in case you're curious. It's really great work. I can't thank her enough for sort of that thing that she's done. So if you're buying glucomannan powder, konjac powder, make sure to get the ones that she recommends, like this Herbal Island or the other one. I forget the one, but it will definitely 100% affect how your fries come out. So one thing that I still don't understand is I actually have to tell something about this here, but if you try something and it doesn't look right, in step 1 or step 2, it's probably not going to be right in step 30. So continuing on forth doesn't really make sense. If you encounter any sort of thing, just send me a message, comment, let me know what happened, and we can try and diagnose what happened, which is how we found this out. A lot of my patrons on my Discord channel said, hey, I tried it and this happened, and we started digging into it, and we just discovered all this crazy stuff that we weren't even aware of. And that's one of the things I love about making these videos, is sharing this information and then getting that feedback, and we can, as a community, figure out what works and what doesn't work. Funny tidbit. So this part here, I was actually making a double batch of fries. So if that looks like a lot of almond flour to you and a lot of Parmesan cheese for a single batch, that is because it is. I realized halfway through something was wrong, and I ended up filming the second half later. But yeah, again, the cornstarch is optional. You don't need it. If you're doing low carb, it works really well. If you're doing keto, it's up to you. But it adds just that nice little extra bit of crisp, especially if you're eating the fries by themselves and don't like eating them with ketchup or any sort of stuff. Highly recommend it. If you're eating them with a sauce, it's a push. MSG. MSG is, how do I say this? There's a lot of studies, and if you're going to cite studies, you need to read the actual study. The one thing I pulled up, somebody linked a study about something and how it causes cancer, Alzheimer's, all sorts of bad stuff. That study it wasn't even a meta-analysis. It was just saying, like, there's all these studies that claim all these bad things. That's called picking and choosing the things that you want to do. It's called confirmation bias, confirming what you believe is going to happen. By the same token, a lot of the studies that it referenced, I went and actually looked at, which is what we should do when we cite a study. It needs to have a good population. I forget all the names now. Basically, it needs to have a high enough sufficient N. So, I mean, we tested X amount of people. Was this an exploratory study? Was this meta study? Was it? There's all sorts of studies. The reason I say is one of these studies that talked about MSG said they gave, I think it was 2 milligrams per gram to mice of their body weight. So for every gram of body weight, they gave them 2 milligrams, which is about 2,000, something like that. I did the math. When you equate this to a 180-pound person, that's the equivalent of 160 plus grams of MSG. This will definitely cause issues. If you eat 160 grams of salt as the 180-pound person, you're going to have problems. Like I think the recommended dosage for sodium a day is 2-3 grams, I think, something like that. Yeah, it's going to cause problems. So that's one of these things when we see studies, like if you're just saturating the body with something, you're probably going to have problems. So what these studies aim to do is sort of like, what's the worst case scenario when somebody's just constantly overloaded with this stuff? So take that into account when you cite studies, actually read the studies, see what they tested, how they tested it. Another big study that's cited a lot is sort of how protein causes kidney failure damage or kidney damage. When you actually look at the study, if I remember correctly, don't quote me, but I think it was a study of 9 people, of which 3 already had kidney problems. So it's like you really have to take these things into consideration when you look at studies and what they cite and what they say. And a study should never say really that this causes this unless they have really, really good proof, because correlation does not equal causation. Remember, everybody who drinks water dies. 100%. They all die. So MSG, up to you. I think it works really well. Obviously, you don't want to overdo it, just like anything. Just enough to provide that umami. And if you haven't seen Uncle Roger, I think Uncle Roger's hilarious. I know it's a fake act. A lot of people don't like it. I love his stuff. Oh yeah. So this is actually the right amount here. This is where I went back to a single serve, not double like I was doing before, where I said I screwed up. The one thing about this is it really should look like this sort of plate. And that goes back to if you have a high quality glucomannan or konjac powder, it'll look like this. If it's watery, stop. It's not going to work. There's no amount of flour you can add, whatever is going to keep it together. Gelatin doesn't work. It's at that point it's foobar. You have a poor quality powder. What's unfortunate is that glucomannan powder is pushed a lot as sort of a dietary supplement for fiber, that sort of stuff. So it's really difficult to find good quality stuff. But it's there. It's out there. Ironically, I found that crinkle cut fries work really, really, really well for this. And I am not a fan of crinkle cut fries, but it has just enough surface area to give it that extra crispy that we're looking for, and just keep it nice and stiff, nice and thick. Also, it kind of gives you that baseline for a nice, perfectly round fry. To further what I'm talking about here is olive oil really, really is a really great oil for this. It works really well, relatively cheap compared to tallow and duck fat, and it works good. One thing that one of my patrons found was that he mixed the beef tallow with, I think it was coconut oil or olive oil. It kind of reduces sort of the pungentness or the strong flavor of the tallow if that's something you're not looking for but do want a hint of, kind of the McDonald's classic flavor, and that will work really, really well. Duck fat really is a different level, and it is expensive, so if you're going to use duck fat to fry the fries, just don't throw it away. Save it. You can cook eggs in it the next day, and that works really well. And one thing I'm actually kind of curious about, and I may need to talk to Steve from Smoking Trails Barbecue, great channel, fantastic guy, is there's this notion of adding beef tallow to brisket to keep it moist and delicious and juicy and all sorts of stuff. I haven't heard of anybody using duck fat instead of tallow when making brisket, and I think that might really, really good. The key point to the fries here, though, is making sure they only get bright golden color, and that's it. You cannot let it get darker, because what it does is essentially burns the almond flour, and it doesn't get crispy. It just gets burnt tasting. The one thing is, if you're going to deep fry the fries, you have to do it at a very low temperature. There is no sort of flash frying it, because it's just going to burn it. The second half of that is there's really nothing in here that you need to cook. There's no eggs. There's nothing raw. So you can really just cook it fast, and it should work. But yeah, if you deep fry it low temperature. This is another part where I kind of use the paper trick and pull Mr. Potato off to the side. And this too is another part where I'm just kind of cutting back and forth and seams down the middle, which was actually difficult because at this point I was splicing three different videos, and it worked really well. If you've never had parsley with your fries, you're missing out. It's a very standard sort of bar fare food, and it works really well. I didn't get a chance to try the parsley, butter, garlic, and toss in the fries in them because I just didn't get a chance. But this here just works. Just a little bit of parsley. It's so good.
Now, these are just a taste test.
The one thing is, so these fries don't make a lot. They make the equivalent of about like a small McDonald's fry bag. I don't even know what those are, but the little white paper bag. And it's not a lot, but it's really sufficient. They're really... they hit that mark, and they're flavorful, and they're really good. Just when I did this here, I'd already eaten a few, so it's a lot less than the one single batch. You can also make them really thin, make sort of matchsticks, but they will be kind of flimsy a little bit to a degree, so just be careful with them. They also work really well if you freeze them, stick them in your freezer and pull them out, fry them then. I haven't tried them in the oven yet. You probably want to coat them in oil before you freeze them, so that way you can pull them out, put them in the oven, 350, probably 15-20 minutes, get a nice golden brown, and again, don't let it get burnt too much. So one part here is as I was filming this, I felt the mustache coming off my face, and you can see it here, and I said, you have to keep going forward. The show must go on. If it falls off, go with it. And it almost did. It's literally hanging on by a hair.
Is that my potato? I can explain the local.
The premise here is he's very mad, sees a potato, realizes that it's not a real potato, and he's been tricked the whole time, and so he feels really bad, and he's like, this is a joke, this is a mockery. And I think it worked kind of well. This is another part where I had to splice in a lot of different music. You went from the happy music of the parsley to sort of the intrigue music of him coming in, and then the sort of mad music of like, what is happening here? And at the same time, I also included a piece about Belgian cuisine. I know most of you probably never looked up the history of French fries because that's a pretty odd thing to do, but they believe French fries actually came out of Belgium. When the French and the Americans were there during World War II, there was a lot of mingling, which is how they think the French kind of came with the potatoes and then brought them the U.S. soldiers brought them to the U.S. and they came with the French fry because they had a lot of potatoes. They ate them a lot with fish during the cold winter or something like that, and French fries. It's just one of those things. Little nod, Belgian cuisine, not necessarily French.
The man in search of his third.
The one thing here is
Crispy, full of flavor, and they're not even made from potatoes.
here's another song shift
Low
of
carb,
sort of that.
most importantly,
What's he thinking?
nobody has that.
What sucks is to me is having sort of these ideas in my head of how I want to film the scenes and the angles and the lens and all that stuff, and you just can't really do it. This part here I really wanted kind of dark, but you know, is what happens. So that stack of papers is actually the storyboard. I think I had about 9 boards per paper, and that's how thick it was. And that helps a lot. If you don't storyboard, you do sort of weird zany videos like I do, 100% have to start doing it. It helps you keep track of what you need to do, what order you need to do it, and what it is you're filming. So I highly recommend it. If you want some software that's free, let me know. I'll let you know down below how to get it. Fantastic stuff, free stuff, open source. I think it's called, what's it called? Storyboarder. Yes, by Wonder Unit. Fantastic stuff. Yeah, I had a full script, full story for this one, which really alleviates the time in post-editing, post-processing, editing, and putting things together. And fantastic.
Better get going.
I think that piece of paper is actually the instructions on how to, I forgot what recipe, but that's what it is. Originally, I had a much grander idea for having sort of the dinner party with all the important people around the table that I wanted to have, and him serving the fries with the keto bacon jam, and it didn't work out because it's a lot more time in it. It's just it doesn't add anything to the story. I really would have loved to film that scene somewhere in Ireland. If you've ever been to Ireland, they have really beautiful doors in the buildings. And the reason for that was to kind of show their wealth and status at the time back in the day. This part of the video, I didn't quite accomplish the intensity that I wanted to accomplish, because in my head I saw him as sort of being dropped off a farm with a suitcase, just long dirt roads saying Idaho sign, and you know, the house in the distance, walking up to it, then that's where he sees his wife. But you have to work within your constraints. So thank you all for watching. If you enjoy these videos, let me know down below. Let me know if you have any other further tips. If you tried the keto French fry recipe and you enjoyed it, didn't enjoy it, let me know. So till next time. Till next time, be well.